All right, so good evening. First of all, I would like to thank Denise and the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share with you my personal experience as a working mother in a public biomedical research institute. And thank you for joining us tonight for this nice conversation. But first of all, I would like to be very clear about 3 points. So this is not a recipe book, and it's not meant to be a to-do list. I'm comfortable sharing with you my personal experience and the ways I developed to deal with the challenges from work and life balance. And I wish my experience can help you answer some of your questions. And finally, if in the situation that we are all superwoman, then I am superwoman, but I'm not a superwoman. I mean, based on what Annika said, it's usually something that people tell me, and I don't feel like that. I don't feel like I'm a superwoman. I don't have superpowers. And if I can balance work and family, you can do it too. So I'm a strong advocate for gender equality, and not only in science, I have to say. The place of women in science has definitely improved in the last decades, but we are still underrepresented with an average of 41% of women versus scientists and engineers in Europe versus 59% of men. And these data are official statistics from 2017 from the European Union, and they are freely available online. And this underrepresentation of women can be easily extendable to the whole world. These statistics, they do not consider whether these women have leadership position or even if the system is improving. Women, we are still struggling to get leadership positions, and I will come back to this point later. And another very important aspect missing in these statistics is, well, how many of these women are actually mothers. And if I'm an active defender of gender equality, I strongly advocate for the recognition of parenthood in research. And this is why I was really thrilled to be invited to this conversation with you. To note that I have found recently this strong community that created a support network for mothers in science. And you can find in their website several articles on a variety of topics, including resources, tips, and advices. So I encourage you to go and check their website and participate in their action if you are interested and feel concerned. So for those of you that are not aware of the classical timeline for a researcher to reach a leading position at the public university, I will quickly go through the multiple step process because there are multiple steps. So first you get your university degree in your early 20s. Then you get usually into a 1-year master program that gives you the diploma necessary to incorporate a PhD program. Then you start your PhD like 4 or 5 years, and then you get your degree. And the majority of PhDs get their diploma when they are in their late 20s. And if you decide to continue working in public research, then 1 or 2 postdoctoral experiences are common and are recommended. And during that time, we specialize in very specific topics, and we kind of become an expert. And this is a very rewarding experience. And finally, you will start applying to faculty positions in your late 30s, early 40s, and hopefully enter a tenure track program to stabilize your income and establish yourself in your domain of expertise. And actually, the step from postdoc to tenure track faculty position is really the trickiest transition. So as you can see, it's a very long and tedious process, and it's pretty obvious that we researchers, we need to be very dedicated and passionate about our job. So when you wonder, when is the perfect time to start a family, right? I mean, how do you deal with the biological ticking clock? And I have to say that the most usual time a researcher decides to have kids is after their PhD graduation and during their first postdoc, like in their late 20s, early 30s. And this explains in part, and only in part, why so many women get kind of stuck and are underrepresented in the tenure track programs. But in my experience, and my motto is that there is no perfect time to have kids, and it's always the perfect time. And now I would like to share with you my personal experience. So I will go, not like Annika, I will go step by step a little bit. My name is Caroline Mauvezin. So I was born in 1979 in the south of France. So I'm currently 41 years old. I'm living in Catalonia in the northeast of Spain. And I'm married to an extraordinary man who also happens to be a researcher in computational biology. And I'm the mother of three terrific kids, 2 girls and 1 boy. But I'm a cell biologist, and I'm passionate about autophagy and lysosomal biology. So when Annika is looking at stars and space, I'm looking at cells with a microscope, and I try to understand the mechanisms and pathways implemented for them to grow and survive under stressful conditions. Autophagy means self-eating. So it's basically a process that the cell has to degrade its own components and recycle them. Autophagy and lysosomal dependent degradation is a conserved pathway from yeast to humans, and it's essential to maintain the cell homeostasis. And perturbances in this process were demonstrated in many diverse pathologies, such as neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson, Alzheimer, but also in cancer and aging. And the best way I found to explain autophagy for general audience is to use the analogy with a city. So in a cell, if the nucleus is the city hall, then the lysosomes are the recycling centers, and the autophagic vesicles are like the garbage trucks that bring the trash to them. So you can imagine that if something goes wrong in this process, then the trash will just spill up, and it would be a very big crisis for the cell and very stressful conditions. So if you want to know a little bit more about autophagy, I also recently made a YouTube video that you can find at the EDBL channel. So as you can see, I do fundamental research, but it has a myriad of applications in different biological sectors. And this is one of the many aspects of my work that really motivates me and keep me going. It's fundamental, but very versatile. So I'm currently a senior postdoc at EDBL. EDBL is a public research institute dedicated to cancer research in Barcelona, in Spain. So 1 year ago, I was awarded a Marie Curie Fellowship, which was a great accomplishment. And I started developing a new line of research in collaboration with my team. And I'm actually interested in understanding the function of autophagy in cell division and chromosomal instability in the context of cancer. But having this great European fellowship also allowed me to develop my skills and actions in science communication. And yearly, I take the time and energy to go to public schools and talk about science. I try to cover different aspects, but of course, always focusing on cell biology, which I'm passionate about. And last year, a 5th grader told me that she loved my presentation and was thinking about studying science, something that she didn't even consider before. And that was a little victory for me, and it felt very good. I co-directed 1 PhD thesis, 1 master's, 6 bachelor theses, and so far I have supervised several young women in their research projects. And until now, I've never had a female supervisor, but I'm hopefully becoming one. And I try to support and encourage young women to pursue their ambition for a career in STEM, and this includes my daughters. So I have a total of 15 peer-reviewed publications, and 7 of them I'm a first author, 3 of them corresponding author. And I'm actually, you can see, I'm actually dealing with a really tricky transition from senior postdoc to faculty position. So our family is polyglot. As I said, I'm French. My husband is Catalan, so he speaks fluently both Spanish and Catalan. But we met speaking in English, so English has always been a big part of our life. And actually, to be as natural as possible, when sometimes there is a disagreement, we switch to English. Our kids speak and understand the 4 languages, and I think it's a great start for them. As a mother, I like to foster critical thinking to my kids, curiosity, respect, and tolerance. And the best way I find to achieve that is to travel. And we are all globetrotters, and planning our next trip is one of the most exciting projects we share as a family. I've always loved cooking, and it's one of the many things my mom passed on to us, my brothers and I. I've always found this very interesting parallel between bench work in the lab and cooking recipes at home. So much that sometimes, honestly, after a long day in the lab doing never-ending experiment, I usually don't feel like cooking. And luckily, my husband is a great cook, and he takes on. Our kids love to participate, and actually, our 12-year-old daughter already takes on the lead on cooking and experiencing new recipes. And our 7-year-old does delicious scrambled eggs, and our 4-year-old little boy, he loves to put his hand into pizza dough. And we do a lot of art and craft, and we find this like very calming and trying to activities to try to refocus. And this also applies to myself. And even on a small balcony, we grow together tomatoes and pesto, strawberries, and we monitor the germing seeds, and we can do a lot of math and learning to respect our planet. But not to forget, I'm a person. And I like to travel, hike, scuba dive, and be with my friends. And they are challenging. It's challenging to follow up on my hobbies, but with my friends, we really try to meet at least once or twice a year and spend a very nice weekend together. And as you can see, I share a lot of my hobbies with my kids. So now I will try to tell you a little bit about my path into science. So I was an undergrad at the University of Montpellier in the south of France, and I studied biotechnology. And for my final bachelor project, I chose to go to the University of Oulu in Finland, and as an Erasmus student. And it is in Oulu that I met this fun and smart Catalan man that then became my husband. I went back to Montpellier for 1 year after Oulu to study a master in structural biology. And I had the chance to do my master thesis in a pharmaceutical company in the south of France. But once freshly graduated from my master, I decided to follow my heart, and I moved to Catalonia in 2004. I was not sure what to do professionally, so I was 24, 25 years old. Research in public or private settings. I applied to various positions while working in flower shop for a little bit. And then I got lucky, and I got a small fellowship of the University of Barcelona to work in a lab at the School of Pharmacy. And this was definitely the inflection point in my career. I knew then that I wanted to become a researcher. So I learned the techniques, and with the support of my supervisor, I was then accepted into a PhD program at IRB Barcelona with a fellowship from the Spanish administration. I have to say, I never went back to France, if you wondered. So it's during my PhD project that I started working on the autophagic pathway in mammalian cells. So I started the PhD program in September 2006, and I was pregnant of our first daughter in August 2007, so just a year into the program. So we were thrilled, but also questioning how we were going to undertake our PhD project, as my husband also studied in his program. And I was lucky to have a healthy pregnancy, and I actually worked in the lab until the week before our daughter was born. I actually flew to Los Angeles, being 5 months pregnant, to participate to my first international conference about autophagy. And I got to know a very nice and welcoming scientific community. So it was a very nice experience. We decided to, my husband and I, we decided to take care and stay with our daughter as much as we could. So basically, we asked our supervisors to have flexible schedules. And basically, one of us was working morning shifts and the other one afternoon night shift. And that was 7 days a week. We did this until she was 16 months old. And I clearly remember switching turn at the tram station, our daughter going from my arms to his arms and vice versa. But we did it. And it was challenging, but it's actually what we are still doing when one of our kids is sick or when we are all quarantined and working from home. So during my PhD, I published 2 first author manuscripts, and I was co-author of 2 more. And I have to say that preparing and revising an article is a really stressful peak in my activity. And my husband was and still is a great support during that time. After my graduation, I decided to continue working on autophagy, but I also wanted to learn another model of study. And I got accepted in a lab working on autophagy in fruit flies, Drosophila, so the little fruit flies. So we actually moved to US, my husband, who also just graduated, our 3-year-old daughter, and I. So that was a big adventure. 90 kilos, I will always remember, we had 90 kilos of luggage in total when we arrived in Minneapolis, Minnesota. When we arrived, my husband did not have a job in the beginning, but luckily he got a postdoc position in a very strong group a few months after. It's actually very challenging to travel and find 2 positions at the same time in the same place. Luckily, the University of Minnesota offers an affordable housing next to campus for international students and specifically to families, and also an access to the university daycare. And this was really convenient, and it helped us a lot to cope with the changes. And I really wish that every university could offer this type of support to families. So I started to work in the lab, and I learned new techniques and started to develop my research project. And then a few months later, I got pregnant of our second daughter. It may sound very challenging, but we are very, very happy. Our kids have siblings to play with and learn from. So we welcomed our daughter during an extremely cold winter for us. Officially, I only had 6 weeks of maternity leave, and we were far away from family and friends. But again, I was lucky that my supervisor gave me the opportunity to go back to work step by step, alternating lab duties and working from home. So this was really hard, especially when we had to leave our 2-month-old daughter in daycare. At that time, I also had to deal with breastfeeding and pumping. And luckily, the University of Minnesota offered a breastfeeding room where moms could come and pump quietly every 2 hours. It was really hard to deal with the experiment timing, but I made it my priority, so I managed to reach my personal goal. And in our field, we all know that you publish or perish. So I organized myself, and I published 5 articles as first author during my postdoc. And again, during the rush, I was sometimes working during the weekends, and sometimes our firstborn daughter came along to see the flies with me because she loved them. I made her a little card with the logo of the university, and she was so excited to join me on my weekend adventures. And it helped me cope with the fact that I had to go to the lab during the weekends. So it's actually when I decided to prepare activities and go to primary schools and communicate about science to encourage the new generation to keep them curious about science and show them how fun is it to work in STEM. Also, I clearly want to show girls that it's possible to be a woman in science and in research. So in 2015, after 4 years being in Minnesota, we planned our next move, and my husband got a position back home in Barcelona. So we were very excited about going back and be closer to friends and family. and also to welcome soon a little boy in our life. So in August 2015, I was five months pregnant, and I applied, as my husband got a position, I applied to postdoc position also in Idibale in Barcelona. And at the third Skype interview, I had to tell the principal investigator that I was pregnant. And this was a really tough moment for me. At the fourth Skype interview, he accepted it to hire me. He told me after that my publication record was really in favor and definitely demonstrated my capacity to deal with research while being a mother. So I got hired, and I started working in October 2015 to give us the time to take a vacation in US before leaving the country, and also to settle down back home. And this was a really tight moment, and I was struggling with this transition. And my friends and I, we have this joke that when we were pregnant, we felt like a snail or turtle. You work slowly, your brain works slowly, hormones are in the way. They were not easy first months in my new position, and my self-confidence kind of crashed, and I actually considered quitting. But luckily, my husband, my friends, and my family were very supportive, and they helped me have a rational view of the situation, and that kept me going. So I spent 3 months at home, as in Spain it's 3 months plus the breastfeeding, including breastfeeding. So with our little boy and his sister, and that was really nice. Meanwhile, I applied to a postdoc fellowship and I got it. So professionally, I was kind of breathing again. So I reintegrated the lab after my maternity leave, and I started to develop my own research project while pumping milk, because I was breastfeeding again. It's kind of my own challenge. But that time I was doing it in the toilets of the hospital, and this was really not a fun moment. Now that kids are older, they are at school and daycare, we created a routine, and we are still switching morning and afternoon parental duties, but really everything settled down. Now, after 4 years being in the lab, I've published 2 articles where I'm co-corresponding author, and I have to say my supervisor is very supportive and is making his priority to help me get into this tenure track position. I feel lucky. Everything is still very, very uncertain, but I know that I have been working hard and I really want to give it a shot, so I will do it. So as you can see, I had a pretty colorful trajectory. So how you balance both worlds? This is a really puzzling question for many, including myself, and I'm still adjusting and I'm still learning from my mistakes. But basically for me, the final aim is to reach my own personal equilibrium, which is to feel good as a researcher and as a mom. And to do so, I try to identify what makes me feel good on both sides and think about how I can reach that by taking advantage of the specificity of my job. So for example, it makes me feel good to get results and publish my work. Again, the publish or perish. But for me, it's very important to be involved in school activities and to be present. Just to wait for my kid to get into the bus and wave them goodbye on the school trip day. This is really important for me and for them. So to do that, what I need is flexibility. And my schedule can be flexible. I have worked hard to demonstrate to my supervisors that I'm actually responsible and efficient with a flexible schedule. Actually, a few years back, I had an interview for an interesting position in a company close to where we live. It went well, but there was no flexibility in terms of working hours, which is pretty usual in a private company. And for me, that was a deal breaker. I mean, right now losing my flexibility was a greater loss for our family balance than any kind of advantages the company would offer us. Another thing I love about my job is networking and traveling to conferences. It helps me to know new potential collaborators, exchange ideas, and catch on the literature. And on the personal level, it's a very resourceful moment for me, like kind of a pause in our routine. But don't think that they are holidays. But it's when I can take a long bath, read without being disturbed. And it's also when I can enjoy some social life. And to be able to do that, I need to rely on my partner. And it is thanks to the trust and the commitment we have that we can do that. And I say we can do that because, again, this goes both ways. My husband also travels to meetings. So now you might wonder what I have been or what are my biggest challenges. Well, first, my research contract does not allow me to have reduced working hours. For me, this is one of the biggest issues because most of my friends have that freedom. But in public research, all the mothers I know are in the same situation that I am in. And on the contrary, in private companies or in public administration, it's commonly accepted that you can have a reduction of working hours. I never had also the option to extend my parental leave. And I have to say the only positive aspect I can see of that is that some of the fellowships or awards that you can apply on to take the parental leave into consideration, which extends a little bit the period of eligibility. But the biggest impact of this impossibility to extend the parental leave was for us to find a nurturing place to take care of our babies and to really accept to leave them. And as I told you, this was especially difficult for our second daughter who was born in US. Then reincorporating my position after maternal leave with the peak of hormones makes it much more difficult for me to concentrate and be productive. I experience this every time after giving birth and returning to work in the lab, and every time my self-esteem was damaged. But then I managed to go back to recreate a little bit of self-esteem. And then to my experience dealing with breastfeeding and pumping while being back to work was really extremely challenging. The infrastructure to support breastfeeding moms are currently inexistent in most of the research institutes I've been working in and or visiting. And I remember really feeling guilty, got into kind of hiding every 2 hours to go pump. And as I said, it was hard to deal with a timely experiment, but it was my personal priority. And so I organized myself and I made it possible, but it was challenging. I noticed that it's actually changing in airports, malls, and even IKEA. You can see breastfeeding rooms. And I hope that research centers and universities will follow on this movement and will really take actions to improve the necessary support for breastfeeding mothers. And then educating kids is a full job by itself. It takes a lot of energy and time. And so at the end of the day, my husband and I, we have little time to share, even less for a me time. So as soon as we have the possibility, to take a time off together, we happily do it. And obviously, having a family, having family changed my priorities and my responsibilities. And so I'm in the lab with grad students, and many of them, they go for a drink after work, they party, they have fun together. I can rarely join them, which makes me feel sometimes like the black sheep. But it's okay. Once I'm home, I get to spend time with my family, and my husband and I, we often remind ourselves that soon our kids won't be living with us. Well, we still have some years to go, but time flies, and really, really want to grasp every moment. So that would be my personal conclusions, that there is no perfect time to have kids, and it's always the perfect time. Knowing your priorities helps to build your own path professionally and personally. I think it's very important to identify and rely on your strengths. For me, flexibility is key, and the partnership is the basis. And for this reason, I really want to emphasize that I am amazed by single parents, and not only the ones working in STEM. I think you're not alone. We are a lot of working mothers in STEM, and I think it's really nice to have this connection and spread the word that we can actually do it. And I think it's very important to continue to advocate for better support for parents in STEM, because we still have a long way to go. And I've added my email here. If you want to send me an email and have questions afterwards, I would be happy to connect with you. And finally, I made, so as Denise mentioned, I made this short YouTube video with the help of Ediscopy, a company specializing in science communication. And this was thanks to the support of the Marie Curie Fellowship. So you can find it again at the Edible YouTube channel if you are curious. And with that, I would like to thank you, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.